Hi, I'm Jeremy Robinson, and this is the 19th hole. So, welcome to the 19th hole podcast. We've had some interesting guests on the show in the last year, so we've got someone a little bit different today. He's not a professional golfer, but he probably knows more about golf than any of us all combined have been on the show. It's great to have Mark Eley on the show today. So, Mark, you are the founder of the Golf Bible. Not a lot of people, I rephrase that, beg your pardon. Some of the people listening will not have heard of the Golf Bible because they're more of a followers of professional golf rather than amateur golf. So if you could really start by explaining how it came about and why you did it.
Yeah, hi, Jeremy. Thank you for inviting me to join you on the podcast. Essentially, I provide a one-stop shop for people that are interested in Great British and Irish elite amateur golf. The background really is very simple. I'm a member of Copteith Golf Club in Solihull. We, as you will be well aware, as a past winner, staged the McAvoy Trophy. I became interested in amateur golf in probably 2012. Started operating the Copteith Golf Club Twitter account, started tweeting about the McAvoy Trophy and other amateur events, got traction, and decided then to spin that off into my own Twitter account. Didn't want it to be about myself, didn't want to end up tweeting about things that I was doing or wider interests, wanted to be focused on amateur golf. So just chose the name Golf Bible, set up a Twitter account just over 10 years ago now, and just simply use it to flag up events, provide prompt links to live scoring and results, and just provide general news on amateur golf. And then on the back of that, I got more interested, I guess, and set up a Golf Bible website in October 2014, and do very much the same on there. Perhaps do, obviously, Twitter's very short form. The website enables me to provide event previews, provide analysis on rankings, and do profiles. I think even wrote a profile of one of your extended family members many years ago, didn't I? I think Dr. Tweddle.
That's right. Yeah.
Which we can talk about or not, and just do other things like that. And then on the back of that, I then started to take more of an interest in the Walker Cup. In my opinion, the RNA and USGA weren't doing the match justice, so I set up a separate website for the Walker Cup. Noticed that walkercup.co.uk was available, took the handle, and I've just simply used that to follow the most recent matches and provide an historical database of information on that match. So that's really the story to date, and I've turned up every day for the last 10 years or so, delivering information for friends, families, coaches, selectors, you name it.
So are you a bit of a stats man then originally? What is your background to?
Yeah, well, my background is corporate finance and banking. Yeah. So I guess I've got a bit of an accountancy trend and a bit of a spreadsheet fetish going on. So I'm not averse to presenting information and analysing data, but I'm by no means, a stat man or anything like that. I just like to present information as clearly as I can.
And clearly, you must be a keen golfer. So handicap?
My handicap is it's hard now with this new handicap system. 7, playing off 9 at Copteith now.
Oh, well, that's pretty good. It's a lovely course. And just to give, going back to the Peter McAvoy Trophy, obviously, I did play in it. I played in the first couple of them actually, and it was set up by Peter McAvoy as Copteith wanted to honour him. Really, is that kind of how it came about?
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, as you well know, won the amateur championship 2 years running in the late 70s. The club wanted to recognise his achievement beyond simply giving him honorary membership, and he suggested a 72-hole boys under 18 competition played over 2 days in typical McAvoy fashion to stretch the players and to make sure he identified the most appropriate winner.
So, and it's gone on from strength to strength, and I believe now it's a girls and boys tournament.
Yeah, in the last few years, it's moved to a mixed event. We can talk about mixed events if you like later on, but yeah, they've had some girl entries in recent years, and in fact, 2 years ago, Olivia Lee won the event, the first and only girl to win the event to date.
And looking down the roll of honour from that event, they have had some good winners, Lee Westwood amongst others.
Yeah, Justin Rose, Lee Westwood, Peter Baker. It's been fortunate to always receive a good entry, but perhaps most importantly for historic discussions, generate 2 or 3 first-class winners, yeah, who've gone on to achieve great things in the game.
Yeah. So before you obviously really before social media more than anything, but before you launched in 2010 the Twitter feed, did you kind of keep a real were you interested in amateur golf, not just Copteith, but generally?
Yeah, no, not really. I think like a lot of people, I was aware of certain things. You know, the amateur championship, you know, would resonate once every year, but I had no idea about the depth of the game and all of the events and how fragmented it was until I really started to take an interest in the McAvoy Trophy. And I'd been a member of Copteith for many years without necessarily taking that much of an interest in it. And then all of a sudden, the moment came where I started to become interested and went down that rabbit hole, which I haven't come out of yet.
And clearly over the years, I mean, from when I was playing amateur golf, and you know, I was lucky enough to play in the Walker Cup in 1987. But even from like 2010, from when you started, you must have seen, well, there has. I mean, you must have seen it more than anyone else. A massive change in everything to do with amateur golf.
Yeah, I think there's been a gradual trend of change and becoming more professionalized, if I can use that word when discussing amateur golf. But that speed of change seems to be accelerating even more in recent years with some of the developments around amateur status and just the quality of players coming through at a much younger age, which you'll be very familiar with, Jeremy.
I mean, yeah, because clearly the guys who turn pro now, especially the ones who are coming out of college, you know, they're 22, 23 years old, but as it's proven, you know, they're ready to win straight away, aren't they? Where when I was, well, even going back to the turn of the 2000s, they weren't ready like they are now.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you were one of the first players, I guess, from Great Britain and Ireland to go over to college in America, but now there are hundreds of players from these shores studying and playing golf, trying to improve out there. And I think just the facilities, the improvement in competition is just driving standards upwards all of the time. And as you rightly say, many commentators now in the world of professional golf are expecting a leading amateur to win on the Pro Tours, PGA that is, in this year or next year, because they are just so good. There's this guy from Sweden, Ludvig Aberg. There's the guy who played well in the Masters, Sam Bennett, who was third after 36 holes. And there are other players, Gordon Sargent and Michael Thorbjornsen, who are excellent. And then there's on the ladies' side, there's Rose Zhang, who's at Stanford, who is off the scale and probably already, despite being a sophomore at Stanford, he's probably already in the top 10 female players on the planet.
Yeah. I mean, saying that, we say that they're ready to win these guys, but you go back in years gone by, and Scott Verplank won as an amateur. He won the Western
Phil Mickelson. Yeah.
And Phil Mickelson, that's right. I remember Scott Verplank beating Jim Thorpe in a playoff.
Yeah.
And also then, you know, you look back and say, and look at when Olazabal turned pro, oh, he was ready, all right. I mean, he finished second in the Order of Merit in his first year. So it's unusual, but it seems to be more the case these days than it was back in 30 years ago, whenever.
Yeah, I think maybe it's more surprising to be able to state that because the standard of professional golf has equally risen, hasn't it, in the 20 years since, or even 30 years since the examples you just gave took place.
Mm-hmm. And so amateur golf has changed dramatically, college players, and you rightly say about amateur status. Do you fear for the Walker Cup and the Amateur Championship and places like that? Obviously, this year's Walker Cup, I hear one or two of the amateurs are staying amateur because it's at St Andrews, and if you're going to play in a Walker Cup, what a place to go and play at it.
Yeah, I think no is the answer to that question. I think there is and will remain a place for the Walker Cup within the golf spectrum. And I think there are still a great many players that want to have that on their resume. And it's a very nice elite club to be a member of, which I don't think it necessarily helps having played in the Walker Cup when you turn pro or offers you that much, but it's just another tick in a box, and it's just a nice achievement to be able to talk about in the future. And I think, hopefully, there's a lot of money flying around in golf nowadays. Hopefully the R&A and the USGA will always be loyal to the tradition and history of the Walker Cup and the role that that's played in the game.
Yeah, as you rightly say, the amount of money in the game these days, in the grand scheme of things, and the R&A and the USGA put on a great event. It's even for the amateurs now, the R&A do. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of money to put on the Walker Cup.
No, I think you're right. You may have heard that there was some surprising news a few months back about the USGA seeking donors to safeguard the amateur matches, the Walker Cup and the Curtis Cup, which came as a complete surprise to me, given the broadcasting revenues that both the R&A and the USGA make from their respective national opens. As you say, yeah, I'm not, it probably costs £500,000, £1 million at the very most, which is a drop in the ocean in the overall scheme of things for me. But there we go.
Well, it's good to hear that you think it's got a future still, because obviously I enjoy watching it. I've watched 2 or 3 matches since I played in it, but I think it'd be a big shame if things like that in the Amateur Championship and the US Amateur Championship were lost, really, and amateur golf became part of professional golf. Because obviously golf's changing a lot at the moment. There's some people trying to dictate the way the game's going.
Yeah, I think it will change, and it has changed from your day, where the likes of Peter McAvoy, Gary Wolstenholme were career amateurs, and there were some older players in the teams. Amateur golf is now a young person's game, and is perhaps getting even younger. So the teams are always going to be made up increasingly of under 21 players, albeit there are again exceptions to that rule. And this year I'm anticipating at least 2 members of the Great Britain and Ireland team being in their mid-20s, and the USGA remain keen to include a mid-amateur in their team as well, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think that's really good, to be honest. It helps keep the history, really, doesn't it? And the people who are still very, very good golfers who have not turned pro, gives them something to aim for. I think it's a really good thing that they're going to keep that.
Yeah, definitely, and long may it continue.
Yeah. So moving on to the world rankings now, not the professional ones. We might have a quick word about that later in the show, but the amateur world rankings. Are you for the way they work, or do you think they could be altered?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of rankings, as we talked about earlier. It's nice to be able to sort of analyse and discuss them. I think we've got a slight problem at the moment in that the World Amateur Golf Ranking, which is the primary ranking run by the R&A for themselves and the USGA, doesn't quite meet the standards that I would like, and isn't as accurate as it should be. I think, was it Max Homer a few weeks ago, when talking about the official World Golf Ranking, referenced the eye test. Does it look right? And all too often, the World Amateur Golf Ranking doesn't look right. There are very clear anomalies, and these all stem from standard ranking issues, such as how are you assessing the events that are being played, which players are you including, how are you amortizing the ranking points that you're allocating, how are you treating team matches, etc., etc. And the World Amateur Golf Ranking is adequate, but it's not as accurate as it could or should be. And the problem we've had arise in recent weeks is that there was an equivalent that was set up at the same time by a gentleman called Fred Solomon in San Francisco, called the Scratch Players World Amateur Ranking, which provided a far more accurate, in my opinion, assessment of our players. But unfortunately, and very sadly, Fred died last month, and that ranking has now been lost to the World of Amateur Golf. So we're all very much left with the World Amateur Golf ranking. There are other rankings. Data Golf do a ranking that includes amateur golfers, but really now the focus will be very much on the World Amateur Golf ranking, and hopefully they'll continue to improve, because they have been through a process of improvement, albeit largely driven by Fred Solomon's Scratch Players, highlighting a lot of the deficiencies that they had.
So, keeping on a kind of ranking situation or a statistical situation, the new handicapping system then. So when the British Amateur used to be done on a handicapping system, you know, with +2 to get in, or the ballot with +2, and then you'd see people from some faraway countries off about +6, +7. So it's important that they get the amateur rankings correct, so the big tournaments can base themselves where you stand in the amateur rankings rather than the handicapping system. Although, having said that, now the handicapping system is worldwide. Surely that's got to be better.
Yes and no, I guess, in that the World Amateur Golf ranking emanated from issues with the Amateur Championship, you may recall, where I think it was the Australian Amateur Champion was excluded on handicap grounds. So they realised they needed to come up with a different solution, which is where the Amateur Golf ranking was established. But the problem with the handicap system now is that has been too openly abused since it's been introduced, and the players have been allowed to include general place scores to manipulate their handicap upwards rather than competitive scores. So you'll have seen in the last 12 months, most of the golf unions and the R&A are now stipulating that players have to have a majority of competitive round scores in their handicap allowance. So I think it's one of those things. I think you use handicaps, you use the World Amateur Golf ranking, but you then need to use people who understand the amateur game. And there are plenty of people like Nigel Edwards, who you've had on the podcast in the past, just to finesse the information and just make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. So it's just a combination of using all three of those factors to make sure that we always get the best possible fields.
Yeah. So it's important that you know, the World Amateur rankings really step up to the plate now then, if there's not really anything else to drive it. They are the force really to create the best fields, as you rightly say.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the professional rankings, I mean, you say the amateur rankings are not quite right, and it's a very good process, or not process, but what Homer said. If you look at the professional rankings, and if you look at it from the outside as an amateur kind of golfing man, the professional rankings at the moment seem to me, and a lot of people would, I think, agree, you know, seem to be in a bit of a mess, really, even without Liv, because the European Tour is not getting as many points as it used to, and the Sunshine Tour, and now Liv's come along, and Dustin Johnson's 70th in the world or whatever. Well, you know, obviously the PGA Championship starting today, he can get points this week, but they've got a long way to go before they get things sorted out, don't you think?
100%. And, you know, for me, the ranking should be completely independent and separate of the tours and not used as a political football. With the ranking should simply be there to rank the players wherever they play, wherever they choose to play. And at the moment, it seems to be, you know, being used as I say, as a political football. And, you know, there's no excuse not to be ranking the Live players appropriately and including them in the ranking. But, you know, the European Tour has to accept that their fields have weakened, and therefore, inevitably, their players who compete on those tours are not going to attract as many ranking points as those that are playing on the PGA Tour events out in the States. It just simply makes sense. And, you know, that's part of the problem that the DP World Tour has at the moment, isn't it, in terms of managing their relationship with the PGA Tour. and trying to keep all of their players happy and competitive.
No, I mean there are major problems. You're right. The DP World Tour, the standard of the fields is, or names wise, they're still very, very good golfers. These guys who are playing on it, very good. You look at the scores, but it's the names aren't there. Everybody wants to play on the PGA Tour, and the European Tour are, giving 10 cards to their top 10 players. Seem to be, I wouldn't say encouraging them to go and play on the PGA Tour, but they're not doing that much to keep them. And whether you like Liv or you don't like Liv, banning these players from playing who would have probably supported the European Tour in the back end of their career, the likes of Westwood, I don't know whether it's right or wrong. I mean, personally, I think it's wrong, but I can see the reasons why it's right as well. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's difficult, isn't it? There's a lot going on, but it does appear to me to be a bit of biting your nose off to spite your face. And I agree with you. Players like Westwood and Poulter would still sell tickets for the British Masters at the Belfry in a few weeks' time. And, if you could attract some of those players in their off weeks, then that would be a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, I can't see how it's, exactly what I think. Poulter was playing at the Belfry, as you rightly say. If Westwood was playing there, maybe get Garcia to come and play, in the odd one, or Garcia playing the Spanish Open. It's got to benefit the European Tour. It can't be bad for it.
Definitely. I just think they need to sort themselves out, and hopefully things will settle down. And it's not good for the game, all of the bickering and arguing that's going on at the moment. So I'm sure they will do, and perhaps some tweaks will be made on everybody's side to enable things to progress in a more acceptable manner.
Going back to amateur golf now, which is why we're kind of really here more than professional golf, but on a subject that crosses over, there's been quite a lot of talk about a professional being a captain of the Walker Cup. And I'm sure there'd be many of them who'd love to do it because it would be an honour. Patrick Harrington's name was mentioned, Justin Rose. Yeah. There's these people who would love to do it.
Well, the R&A have been sort of talking in recent years about the difficulty of finding future captains for their Walker Cup and Curtis Cup teams. Obviously, they have historically sought to find former players that have remained amateur. And as we were discussing earlier, nowadays there are very few amateur players that compete in the Walker Cup that don't turn pro immediately afterwards, frankly. So they've been facing this challenge. And obviously, there was a big development in this regard in March when Katrina Matthew was announced as the 2024 Curtis Cup captain for the match at Sunningdale. So having sort of set that precedent, I think it is generally expected that the next Walker Cup captain will be a professional. It's very strongly rumoured within the amateur game that Paul McGinley is on a list of one to become the next Walker Cup captain.
Right.
He obviously supported Stuart Wilson in the R&A at Seminole in 2021. I think he's got a property, hasn't he, down in Jupiter or that area. So I'm sure it was on his door, but it may well have been part of a transition process or a handover process to give him a feel, not that he needed it as a former player. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes. At the end of the day, a professional captain, like an amateur captain, doesn't play any shots. And I don't know, is there a big difference between managing pros and what they bring to a party in a Ryder Cup and managing less experienced amateurs? I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see whether there is any impact from Katrina's appointment and possibly the appointment of Paul or Padraig or Stephen Gallagher, or, as you say, Justin Rose down the line.
I mean, I think it'd be great for the Walker Cups. I think it would bring the profile possibly a little bit higher than it already is if it was dwindling at all. Take it up there. If McGinley was captain, it'd be a great appointment. Stephen Gallagher, you're rightly saying, another one who would do a great job. So yeah, I think it's good. It's a big change, but I think it's good.
Yeah, I think it's coming, and Stephen Gallagher's captaining the Junior Ryder Cup European side this year.
Yeah.
So and obviously does a lot for amateur golf, particularly in Scotland already. So he would certainly be a name to add to the list. We're on a run of Scottish captains at the moment, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's probably it's probably likely we'll be having a change. So he may have to wait his turn, but I think it's coming, and as you say, it will hopefully raise the profile of the match even higher.
Yeah, and this year's Walker Cup, talking about Scotland, home of golf, St Andrews. I mean, if you're going to play in a Walker Cup as a British player, that would be the place you'd pick, isn't it?
I think the history and tradition of the town is fantastic. I think many of your listeners will have stood on that first tee and felt the goose pimples, and it is a very special place. I think it will be a great competition. Obviously, the United States will turn up as huge favourites. They always do. Yeah. I'll be crossing my fingers for a bit of wind and rain to acclimatise them. But I think the only disappointment is that I don't know if you read the RNA have got trouble with clubhouse development, and obviously one of the nice things about St Andrews is having a picture on the Swilcan Bridge and the view down towards the clubhouse and the 18th green. Obviously, it's going to be a building site for the Walker Cup, and the clubhouse won't be open for the players. You know, only a minor issue. There's plenty of other places to change your shoes and spend the night, kind of thing. But it'll be, I think it'll be disappointing that having returned the match to the venue, it's the centenary of the first Walker Cup at St Andrews as well. It's a shame that things won't be absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I mean, the players won't mind, but as you say, historically and for the pictures and for history going forward, it is a bit disappointing. But still, it'll be a great event, and you know, I wish them all the best. Who's going to win it then? You say the Americans will turn up as big favourites, which they will do. You know.
Yeah, I think you know, obviously at home, GB and I have got a good chance. They were competitive at Seminole. The old course is a course that all of the players that are selected will probably know very well. We have in the next few weeks the St Andrews Links Trophy coming up, which is always played on a variety of courses, but this year we played it on the new and old courses. So we're going to have real good home advantage. So hopefully it'll be a competitive match and we can give them a run for their money. But you know, any bookmaker would say that America must start as strong favourites.
Yeah. So just kind of moving on a little bit from the Walker Cup, in your opinion, amateur golf sounds like it's at a very strong place at the moment, and the standard of the golf is extremely high, and hopefully it'll continue.
I think it will do now. There's a lot of effort being made to help with the transition from the amateur game into the professional game. It was getting a bit too siloed, but the recent changes to the amateur rules, the amateur status rules around name, image and likeness are facilitating payments to the top amateur players, which will hopefully keep them in the amateur game and more importantly in college and education for a longer period, which will be better for them long term. Yeah. And then there's also the recent announcements around helping that transition for the top players from college golf onto the PGA Tour, this PGA Tour University, PGA Tour University Accelerated programs, which I think again are a positive for the game. And it would be nice to think that the DP World Tour could do more in this regard as well, because there are a lot of our players out there now. Not all of them are right at the very top of the game and will therefore benefit from the two schemes I just mentioned. But you'd like to think there was something that the DP World Tour could do to just, you know, help one or two players onto the main tour, the real top quality ones.
Yeah, I was going to say that because I feel, and whether it's right or wrong, that the PGA Tour setting up the university scheme is possibly a little bit of a reaction to LIV, so that the young players don't sign up with LIV, trying to keep them. And that's fine. But I do agree totally with you that DP World Tour possibly could do the same kind of thing.
In the PGA Tour's defence, the PGA Tour University programme had been in the works before LIV came along. You're absolutely right, though. It certainly focused their minds in developing it and upgrading it. Obviously, some of the first live signings were James Pio, the reigning US amateur champion, and perhaps more importantly, from the PGA Tour's perspective, a very strong Spanish amateur, Eugenio Lopez Chacara, who signed, and I think he won, didn't he? He won an event on the Live Tour in his first year. I think that resonated with them perhaps more than James Pio did. But it does show that, you know, Live were sniffing around the top amateur players, and a lot of the leading ones were approached, but didn't go, thankfully.
Yeah, well, we could go on chatting about this for a long time, because obviously there's the connection between professional amateur golf is getting closer and closer. But hopefully, as we say, hopefully there'll still be a difference in the two, and amateur players can go on to do great things as amateurs and then turn pro, because not all the amateurs make it as a pro. So it's nice when they can look back, and as you rightly say, played in the Walker Cup. I look back now, and when I played in it, it was fantastic. But then when you turn pro, you don't think too much about it. But getting to my age now, I like looking back and thinking, yeah, it was an achievement.
Definitely. And I think, you know, amateurs have to be realistic, don't they? I mean, professional golf and making a living as a professional golfer is very difficult. And of course, the living out of a suitcase lifestyle isn't for everybody as well. So, you know, I think, you know, amateur golf has its role, and that transition to the professional game and making it as easy as possible, because up until very recently, it was very much a case of you announce your term, you announce your turn pro, you had the helping hand of a golf management company like Blackstar, but you were very much on your own all of a sudden, from having your hand held by a national union, or if you were fortunate enough to be out in the States, a college golf infrastructure. So it's a really interesting discussion point. And, you know, I look back, Jeremy, on the sort of 10 years I've been following amateur golf very closely, and probably only Matt Fitzpatrick, of the hundreds of male players that I've come across in that time, is the only one to really, I'd say, I know he was an exceptional player, really make, you know, a good living from the game. I mean, there's been other players like Jordan Smith, Sam Horsfield, who's with Liv now, Robert McIntyre, Tom McKibben's made a very good start to his pro career. But, you know, beyond that, not many more have made what I would call after costs, you know, a solid living out of the pro game. And that just shows you, doesn't it, the small percentage that can make it in this game.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. Well, Mark, it's been fascinating speaking to you. We could go on for hours and hours and hours. And it'd be nice to have you back on again, because I've learned quite a lot today, and I'm sure the listeners have. So thanks very much for coming on. And with the amateur season just really at its height now, and the Walker Cup coming up, and the Amateur Championship, etc., you'll be busy, and so we'll all be looking out at your feed. So
thank you very much.
Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you, Jeremy.